Good evening, and thank you for sticking with us here on BNC Live. I'm Brittany Jones. The White House is defending why President Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus relief bill must be passed soon. In 2 weeks, many Americans will lose their jobless benefits if the bill passes. It would include another round of one-time payments. It would also include tax credits and additional aid to state and local governments to fight the pandemic. Press Secretary Jen Psaki made the case earlier today.
In 2 weeks, on March 14th, around 11 million Americans will start losing their unemployment benefits if Congress doesn't act on the president's rescue plan. There are 11 million Americans who are unemployed through no fault of their own, but who will struggle to put food on the table, struggle to make ends meet, and struggle to live with the dignity they deserve.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, he has a message for migrants who are considering traveling to the U.S.-Mexico border, and that message is do not come, just wait. Mayorkas, he delivered those remarks in the press briefing room today with harsh criticism for the Trump administration and their immigration policies. Mayorkas, he stressed how the prior administration dismantled the country's immigration system and that the Biden White House, they need more time as they are working to rebuild the system virtually from scratch. Those were his words. Now, the country is seeing a surge in migrants as the current administration works to roll back Trump's hardline immigration policies. Mayorkas, he did note for migrants who attempt to cross the border right now that the administration, they will be obligated to follow CDC travel restrictions and return them to Mexico due to COVID-19. Now, Mayorkas, who leads the task force for reuniting families, he said that under this administration, they have reunited 105 families so far. Mayorkas, he went on to say how they will continue to work to reunite families, especially with this task force, and they're seeking an option for families to reunite here in the U.S. or in their country of origin. Now, the Biden administration, as of recently, they have come under fire for their policies on unaccompanied minors in the immigration system and opening a child migrant center in Texas last week. Now, it's been reported that Border Patrol takes an average of 300 children into custody every day. Mayorkas, he pushed back on comments that the Biden administration were continuing Trump administration immigration policies.
Well, let me, if I may, correct one of the premises of your question. You said that we're handling them in the same way that the Trump administration did, and that is absolutely inaccurate.
The process that you articulated is
actually, the Trump administration expelled children to Mexico. And we are not expelling young children. We are not apprehending a 9-year-old child who's come alone, who's traversed Mexico, whose loving parents had sent that child alone. We're not expelling that 9-year-old child to Mexico when that child's country of origin was Guatemala, Honduras, or El Salvador.
Now, Mayorkas, he explained further how minors are housed by Customs Border and Protection for 72 hours and then ordered to the Department of Health and Human Services, which seeks out relatives here in the U.S. to place the children. This process takes an average of 31 to 32 days. Mayorkas, he went on to say how this surge at the border that we are seeing is not a crisis, but a challenge that the administration is currently working through. This evening, Mayorkas, he also participated in a virtual meeting with President Biden and Mexico's president. Now, prior to the start of that meeting, President Biden told Mexico that the U.S. sees them as an equal and not somebody at the southern border. Reporting live from Washington, I'm Ariana Maniz for BNC.
Our thanks to Ariana. Well, a lot of people are watching Washington this week, of course, to see what they'll do on COVID relief. It has passed the House. Now it's up to the Senate. Well, Republican strategist Sir Michael Singleton, he's the host of Vox Media's Consider It show, and Democratic strategist Atiba Manjun is with us now to talk about this. Welcome to BNC.
Hey, thanks for having us.
So to both of you guys, there's a lot happening on Capitol Hill right now. The COVID relief bill, as we just mentioned, is of course at the top of the list. The Senate is expected to vote by the end of the week. Atiba, what can we expect? We'll start with you first.
Well, there's a lot of infighting, we know, with the minimum wage piece of the bill. What are we going to expect to see? We've been watching Joe Manchin, who's pretty much been like the deal breaker with this. And so Republicans are, in my opinion, doing a lot of whining and complaining and making this harder for Americans who are struggling. So I think that we're going to continue to see a lot more of that. But I do think that the bill is going to pass.
And Sir Michael, let's get your opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, look, Democrats have the numbers to pass it. As it pertains to the minimum wage, I do know that there are some progressive members on the House side that are trying to push Vice President Harris to use some of her vice presidential powers in some maneuvers that I don't think I've ever seen, maybe once or twice in the history of vice presidents as it pertains to trying to pass very sort of controversial legislation. So I'm not exactly sure if that will pass, but as it pertains to the legislation as a whole, I do think it will pass. I mean, under normal circumstances, as a conservative, I would probably argue that we should not be spending as much money as we have. But I think that argument is sort of out of the window at this point. I do think that there are some economic arguments to be made about pumping more money into the economy. So perhaps by next year, we sort of see a V-like recovery, meaning we're at one point high, we're sort of at the point where we're in the dip and we're slowly beginning to recover. And so when you think about that argument, I do think it leads some credence to the idea that we should, pass the stimulus. But I do think in doing so, there needs to be some level of stipulations in it, particularly as it pertains to how much money we're giving to individuals. The overall goal should be to ultimately get people back to work, not continuing to hand out money, because as we know, a lot of that money for most people will only last for a matter of days, maybe even weeks. But when you're talking about families, it's just not enough for families to sustain and survive.
And the Dems had
I'm
said,
sorry.
you want to
I just
respond to
want to
that?
say,
Go ahead.
I do, because here's the thing. We've got families, middle-class families in particular, who are struggling to pay their rents and their mortgages. And to say that we don't want to hand out money is an insult. It's the American people's money that we're talking about. So to say that you don't want to hand out money to Americans, that it's actually their money, that over the last 4 years we saw get misspent because we saw tax breaks for the wealthy, and we're right now seeing an incredible transfer of wealth is going from the poor to the wealthy. This bill, it has to pass, and it really is not enough money to take care of and to help these families, but it is something to at least get us started.
If I could just rebut really quickly. Look, I think most Americans understand that, but at the end of the day, we are facing a $20 trillion plus deficit. I don't know if that really means much to most people nowadays. Secondly, I think most people would argue, yes, we appreciate the money, but more than anything, we would like to get back to work. So while I do understand the underlying concern of giving people something to give some level of a cushion, allowing people to get back to work is the ultimate goal. Because again, $1,400, $2,000, that's not enough money. Once you pay your rent or your mortgage, you can't afford food. You can't take care of medicine or prescription pills, or take care of an elderly family member if you're a family of 2, 3, or 4. So yeah, I maintain the argument that money is not enough. Yeah, give it to people so that they can sustain, but the ultimate objective here should be to get people back to work as quickly as possible. That is how we recover from this, not by giving out stimulus checks that will only last a week or two.
So y'all both agree that everyone needs more in this particular case. So say that the Democrats do not get everything that they want in this particular bill. Do you see President Biden coming forth with another COVID relief bill in the near future? And I'll start with you first, Atiba.
Yeah, I do. I think that down the line we're gonna have to come back to this. I mean, we're in this situation now because the prior administration played politics with an issue. We've seen politics being played with masks, which is a reason why we're still trying to recover from this pandemic and get some things under control. And in terms of putting people back to work, we keep hearing this thing about putting children back in schools. That is just a veiled attempt to get people back to work. And the idea of getting people back to work is to put them back into harm's way. We've got to get finished with the rollout of the vaccine. We still got to finish in terms of making sure that we're modernizing a lot of our buildings so that they can stay clean, so that we don't continue to spread this deadly pandemic or deadly virus. There are a whole lot of other things that are in play, but we're not giving money. We're providing money back to Americans who are definitely in need of that. And I don't think there's anyone who's going to say that, okay, you're giving me money. It's providing them with something, and it's not a cushion. It is basically something to help push them ahead a little bit, but it's not enough. I mean, we start looking at what's going on right now, and then you look back at the pandemic of 1918, it took 4 years to get out of that. Mm-hmm. Every time they thought things were getting better, it went back because they rushed back, because there's this whole idea within this capitalist system of continuing to work, and put people in harm's way. So let's make sure that we're putting people first, Let's make sure that we're putting the health of people first and stop talking about money, because in the end, if we keep looking and seeing we've already had 500,000 deaths, we continue to see more and more deaths happen to this, there are going to be less people that are going to be able to work. And a lot more people that are going to be afraid to go back to work.
And Michael, I want to give you a couple seconds to respond before we let you both go.
Sure. No, I mean, I think that there probably is a likelihood that we will have to see another form of stimulus. Again, my hope is that it will be less. I think people want to get back to work. I think people recognize that while they appreciate the assistance from the federal government, their taxes that they have paid, I think, again, the ultimate goal is for people to be able to take care of themselves. And I think when you look at most data, people would say if we can do that in a safe way, we would like for that to occur. But again, I do think the stimulus is a cushion. I do think that the ultimate end goal here is to be able to speed up this process so that the recovery is a lot quicker. I think we can clearly go back and blame the previous administration. We all know where the blame lies, I should say. But I think, again, if we're looking forward, the question has to be, how do we get the vaccine out to as many people as possible? How do we open up our schools quickly enough so that people, particularly those who are in more vulnerable communities who need to actually work, how can we do that in a safe manner? And I think if the Biden administration can lay out a clear plan to do so, then I think you do build up that comfort level for the everyday American, where people will say, okay, we feel comfortable getting back out there and working again. But I think the jury is still out on whether or not the administration can do that in a quick enough way and also in a reliable way.
I guess we can say it's safe to say that both of you agree to disagree. Thank you both, Atiba and Michael, for your insight. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
And with that, we're going to take a quick short break. See you in about 2 minutes.
Closed captioning brought to you by Nutrisystem. Lose weight and get healthy with meals delivered to your...
Welcome back. Highly contagious variants of the coronavirus paired with relaxed safety measures is threatening to put the U.S. back at square one with the ongoing battle against COVID-19. After weeks of declining case numbers, new infections are on the rise again. That has health officials warning everyone to stay vigilant as the vaccine rolls out. Today, Johnson & Johnson began shipping millions of doses of vaccines out of this plant in Shepherdsville, Kentucky. The FDA on Saturday cleared J&J's one-shot vaccine. The U.S. will initially get a few million vaccines today, but by the end of March, J&J expects to deliver 20 million doses to the U.S. and 100 million by summer. Dr. Anthony Fauci says it's a vaccine he would take.
What vaccine is better than the other vaccine? In order to be able to determine that, you would have to compare them head to head. This was not done. We have 3 highly efficacious vaccines that also, as Dr. Walensky says, has a very good safety profile.
Residents from some of Philadelphia's most vulnerable communities are getting COVID vaccines at a mass vaccination site set up just for them. The clinics are part of an effort to get COVID-19 vaccines into the arms of people of color. BNC's Astrid Martinez has that story. Health experts are urging Americans to get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine if it is made available to them. The J&J vaccine would be the first one-shot COVID-19 vaccine in the U.S., and about 70 million doses of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines have already been administered. For BNC's chief medical editor, Dr. Corey Aber is with me now. Dr. Aber, it's always good to see you.
You as well. You as well.
So, Dr. Aber, millions of vaccines are now on the way. We've got 3 options to choose from now. How should people, and I'm talking about specifically us, Black people, choose which vaccine is the best to get?
Yes. And that's why I say you don't need to choose as a Black person. You need to get the vaccine that's available to you. So the answer is yes to all 3. Now, granted, we know that the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine both have 94.5 and 95% effectiveness, respectively. And the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a one-shot with a 66%. However, just remember that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was doing its clinical trials during the variants. Now, just remember, none of these vaccines were compared head-to-head, so you have to take them individually. So the Pfizer nor the Moderna vaccine were actually doing their actual clinical trials during the variants, which means that's why both of them now are actively working, feverishly working on a booster, which is a third vaccine. And their study sites have actually received that booster to put into their trials. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine may be only 66% effective from getting you sick, but it's just 90% effective in actually preventing death, which, if you have to think about it, a one-shot vaccine that's 90% effective in preventing death against the variants is actually probably a good vaccine to get. I would say I would put it against the other two at any point. So take whichever one you can.
Whichever one you can. So what about the pharmaceutical companies are saying they can provide shots to more than 1/3 of the U.S. population by the end of March? It's a huge mission, but do you think that can quickly help cut down the number of cases even more?
Well, what we would hope that it would, because we know that we're concerned about the variants. They're called mutations. The virus is the constant, and it will never stop mutating until there are less infections. The way that you have less infections is to wash up, mask up, separate, and vaccinate. That will decrease the infection rate. Once we decrease the infection rate, then the variants will stop, because the virus can only mutate when it's infecting people. Just remember, like, if you have your whole house that's burglar proof, you think it's burglar proof, the burglar only has to find the one window you left open. And so that's what the virus is constantly doing, looking for that one thing that you did wrong so that it can infect you. You didn't wear your mask. You touched your eyes after you touched someone else that actually had COVID-19. You didn't get a vaccine. You were sitting next to your uncle drinking liquor at your house, and then he was talking directly into your face without a mask on for 15 minutes. And these are the types of things that you must control, because if you do not control them, these are the ways that the virus is getting into us, replicating, and then making the variants. And Dr. Fauci also said that we're having some issues because some scientists feel that we should really just get one shot for everybody, no matter Pfizer or Moderna, because we should just get everybody one shot and then come back and then give the second shot to everybody, to the people that actually really need it. Because if we can get this under control very quickly with a one shot for everyone, then we possibly could decrease the variance. However, there are several other factions of the CDC that actually feel like that shouldn't be the case, because if you only half vaccinate the people that get the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, then that means that it would breed more variants. So at this point, we're still at odds about some of these things, but what you need to do is the things that we know will protect you. Wash up, mask up, separate, and get that vaccine at all costs.
And I hope people are listening. All good stuff. Dr. Corey Aber, BNC's Chief Medical Editor, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And coming up, we're celebrating Women's History Month by spotlighting a Black woman who has broken the glass ceiling in cybersecurity and is addressing systemic racism in technology. That's up next. Welcome back. Today marks the start of Women's History Month. I gotta say, girl power. And Black women have and continue to break records. Today, we highlight cybersecurity, where attorney and cybersecurity expert Camille Stewart is breaking all the rules and changing the game. Let's take a listen. I love that. And now we move on to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Frontline workers have experienced mental health problems similar to those who responded to past disasters, talking about like Hurricane Katrina or the 9/11 attacks. That's according to a study published in the Journal of Psychiatric Research about healthcare workers directly involved with the early days of COVID-19. Well, our health and wellness expert, Jane Marks, is here with me now to talk about this. And Jane, what do you think about this? How are they impacted?
Oh, they are impacted in so many ways. You know, they liken this to domestic combat. And so what this does for healthcare workers is it puts them at risk for so many issues. For example, we now know that most healthcare workers report 72% more just personal distress, 50% more anxiety and depression. We are seeing cases of significant alcohol disorder abuse, you know, not just alcohol abuse, but this, and these are people who have never, you know, spent a lot of time drinking before, but the stress is so high at this point that what they find is that they are experiencing so many symptoms because they're confronted with this enormous level of stress on a daily basis, and there is no let up. You know, even though, you know, just like you guys talked about earlier today, we're still seeing in some areas COVID on the rise, and so these healthcare workers are simply exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, and they're definitely taking it home with them. It's kind of hard to kind of unpack. So talk about how could a pandemic produce the same results as a large-scale disaster like we mentioned with Hurricane Katrina?
Well, it can do so in so many ways, because with the pandemic, remember, in this pandemic, there is, we kept thinking that the curve would flatten, and yet it has not. And so these healthcare workers are faced with these life and death choices every single day. They're witnessing their patients die. They're having to communicate with family members to say, listen, we lost your patient. Or they're having to sit with patients while they're going through these horrific things. And then what happens is the minute they finish with one patient, there's another one right behind them. And even in communities where you're seeing lower numbers, still, we're talking about a year of continued exhaustion. And so it's like being in combat. And what we do know about trauma is that when it impacts on a person, it just doesn't clear up automatically. And then here's the other thing. In communities of color, it brings to mind, again, so many healthcare workers, believe it or not, are certainly part of this community, so they're faced with this on a regular basis. They're separated from their homes, they're having to isolate themselves for fear of transmitting these kinds of conditions to their family members, so it's like a double whammy.
Well, in the Black community, I mean, you just mentioned mental health can be pretty much a taboo topic. Everybody doesn't want to talk about it. Would it be the same for people in the healthcare field?
Oh, well, absolutely, because we typically, healthcare workers see themselves as very strong and that they can handle almost anything, so they're not likely to talk about what's going on. But what we say to them is that's one of the first things you should do. You need to share what's going on. You need to put language on what your experiences are. That's going to help you navigate this. Of course, we always talk about other things. For example, you need to get out in the sun for 10 or 15 minutes a day, and certainly exercise is key in all of this. But more importantly, you must understand, healthcare workers, that your feelings are very real. They're these very intense feelings under abnormal circumstances. Now, we know it's going to pass at some point, but for right now, you've got to be very patient with yourself because, again, you're faced with this trauma. You're witnessing trauma and feeling it on a day-to-day basis.
And Jane, you say they have to be patient. What are some things that they can actually do? What's some recommendations when they go home and it's time to go to sleep? How do you just say, you know what, I have to relax?
And have got to turn it off. And so you want to participate in some kind of behavior that's joyful, whether it's listening to music or looking at some sort of funny comedy, or just spending time with your family members, or using another part of your brain, creating, like, here's an interesting thing, like creating playlists from back when you're in high school. So you're talking about pivoting to something that is so different than what you're witnessing on a daily basis. And understand one thing. For most healthcare workers, we in this country and all over the world, we are very supportive of healthcare workers. We will reach out if we know you need a little compassion. We're going to do that as a world because we're so thankful for everything that healthcare workers have done throughout this last year.
And we talk about this on Self-Care Saturday, but we might as well tell us today, what are just a couple of self-care tips you would like to give them?
For them, one of the things we want to make sure you do is that you adopt a self-care policy. For example, your nutrition is crucial, your sleep is crucial, exercise is crucial. Even though your schedules are so demanding, even if you can do 5 to 10 minutes and break it up during the course of the day, that you're doing something for yourself. Remember, we're grateful to you, but you should also be grateful for those things in your life that are special to you. So take the time to journal them out, take the time to, to write them down, and know there's a world who cares about you just as you care for us.
All right, Jane Marks, you are always dropping the gems for us. Anything else you wanted to leave us with?
Well, I think for the rest of us who are not healthcare workers, if we can say something kind to a healthcare worker this week, it's going to make all the difference in the world for them. And so I think, this being, women's, let's just pivot just to the women healthcare workers this month. Not that we appreciate the males.
We do.
Yeah, we do. But this is a special month, so let us lift them up and let's do everything we can to salute those people who care for us on a daily basis.
All right, our Jane Marks, mental health and wellness expert, thank you so much. Well, the Golden Globes were full of surprises, tears, and controversy. Coming up, we have the complete rundown of the night. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's get a late look of our weather across the country with meteorologist Brittany Lockley.
Well, this evening is going to be a wet one, especially on Wednesday. And for you all in Chicago, nothing but sunshine. Back to you.
Our thanks to Brittany. Well, turning to entertainment news, a lawyer is seeking criminal charges against rapper T.I. and his wife Tiny for alleged sexual abuse and assault. Those include at least 10 women. The lawyers detail some of the allegations in a media video conference today. BNC's Ayanna Crystal has that story.
Jane Doe 6 was suicidal as a result of this.
At least 10 women and 1 man are accusing T.I. Harris and Tamika Tiny Harris of multiple sex, weapons, and drugging crimes spanning 15 years.
My only focus is getting these women justice.
He would thank God. He would thank his parents. He would thank his ancestors for their guidance and their sacrifices. He would thank his incredible team, Michael Green, Azim Chiba, Nikki Fioravante, Evelyn O'Neill, Chris Huvane, Logan Coles. He would thank his team on set for this film.
Looking gorgeous and obviously emotional, that was Taylor Simone Ledward, Chadwick Boseman's widow. She accepted the Best Performance Award on his behalf and gave an emotional speech during the virtual award show. Boseman won the Fame Award for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Netflix film inspired by the true life story of the blues legend. Diversity took center stage at the Golden Globes with black actors winning several key awards. But as our Anita Bennett reports, some Hollywood insiders say that is not enough.
And the Golden... I'm Anita Bennett for BNC.
Our thanks to Anita. Well, make sure you tune in to start your day with Mike Hill and Sharon Reed tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Eastern. On Tuesday, they will speak to the head of the NFL Players Association, DeMaurice Smith, about the lack of diversity in the league. You don't want to miss that. Well, that will do it for us tonight here on BNC Live, but the news always continues. Make sure you connect with us on social media for all the latest news. Plus, check out our website at bnc.tv. I'm Brittany Jones. I'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you have a good night, and we're going to leave you with a nice look on Washington, D.C. Have a good night.